Okay, hello. Hello, Phil.
Hi,
I'm
Caroline.
so excited to have this conversation with you today. My name is Carolyn Peter, and I'm an assistant curator of photographs here at the Getty. And we're going to be talking, I'm going to be talking to Phil Chang, one of the artists in 19th century photography now. A few housekeeping details for all of those of you in Zoom land. We have closed captioning. It's been enabled, and to access live captioning, click the CC icon on your Zoom menu bar at the bottom of your screen. And you can use the question and A box to ask questions of us. There will be time for questions at the end of the conversation. I would like to thank Greg, Danielle, Daniela, and Vaughn for all you've done to make today happen. And let's see, to give you a little idea about this exhibition, 19th Century Photography Now, former Getty Associate Curator Karen Hellman conceived of 19th Century Photography Now. And I think Karen's out there in Zoom land, so hi Karen. And I'm honored to have seen the exhibition through to fruition over the past year. Karen and I are grateful to Claire LaRue and Antares Wells, who wrote the 19th century labels, and to all of our Getty colleagues who helped us realize this exhibition. At the heart of the exhibition is the idea that 19th century photography has a resonance with 21st century artists today. We were surprised to learn just how many contemporary artists are using 19th century photography as a point of departure. And we hope you'll agree that ideas from early photography are still very relevant today. They're very current. The ideologies are still circulating, and it's exciting to see how so many contemporary artists exploring and interrogating these pictures from the 19th century. There are 21 21st century photographers and 33 19th century artists in the exhibition, and each contemporary artist is paired with at least one 19th century photographer. Arranged around 5 themes that both 19th and 21st century photographers have grappled with in their practice, we have the themes of identity, time, spirit, landscapes, and circulation. Whoops, and there's another view just of the circulation gallery. So 3 of Phil's works from his Unfixed series are on view in the time section, which explores how to convey time, how to capture a moment, how to capture movement, and thinks about the fleetingness of early photography and contemporary photography and life in many ways. A little about Phil. Phil is originally from Indiana. He received his BA from the University of California, Irvine, and his MFA from the California Institute of the Arts. He recently had solo exhibitions at the Penumbra Foundation in New York, Fulcrum Press, and M&B Gallery in Los Angeles. He's also exhibited in group shows in LACMA, SF MoMA, the Transformers Station in Cleveland, and the George Eastman Museum. His work is in collections here at the Getty, at SF MoMA, LACMA, and the California Museum of Photography. He teaches at Cal State University, Bakersfield, and the Milton Avery Graduate School of the Arts at Bard College in New York. And he's told me he's on his way there next month. So Phil, whoops. Let's go back one, come on, there we go. So here's another view of your work in our show, 19th Century Photography Now. And I just wanted to ask you, can you tell us how you became interested in photography?
Absolutely. Could I maybe say some thanks quickly?
Sure.
I wanted to thank Arpad Kovacs, who visited my studio in 2021, must have been the Delta wave of the pandemic, so we were masked. He saw my unfixed works, and then in 2022, he then told your former colleague, Karen Hellman. I met Karen, and then I met you because of this too. So thank you. It's been an amazing experience.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd show my unfixed works in this institution. So I got interested in photography based on a fluke. My immigrant father was worried about my economic future when I was in my 20s and bought me a subscription to Fortune magazine. And with that magazine subscription came a wind-up plastic panoramic camera that shot 35 millimeter. And so I never read the magazine, I just would use a camera. My background is in sociology and history. I discovered photography on a fluke, but I realized a camera was another way to translate or understand the world in a similar way that kind of participant observation or research would be for me too. So it was basically my father's concern about my economic future. Is how
So
I
you
got.
have your dad to thank.
I have my dad to thank, yes.
Okay. And how did the idea of the Unfixed series come to you?
Yes.
Whoops, we'll stay with this one for right now.
You know, it had to do with discovering a box of Kodak Kodabrom 2 RC resin-coated paper. At the time, I was employed by UCLA doing cultural heritage imaging, and some of people might remember this around 2007, 2008, a lot of people are being laid off or losing work or being furloughed. And so I was at UCLA working as a photographer. There was a photography services department, not the photography academic department. They were bankrupt and they were folding basically. So they asked me if I wanted anything. And they gave me 2 boxes of this Kodak paper. Kodak ceased producing it in 1993. And there's a rapid developer built into the emulsion that allows me to kind of do this, where I don't have to use a darkroom. I don't subject the prints to developer stop or fix. In fact, I just make an exposure. I achieve a legible image. But because there's a rapid developer built into the emulsion, it allows me then to present it and then ask viewers, like the light that they need to view it makes it transform to a monochrome or makes it expose. So that's how I got into this. And it was basically a response to the financial crisis of 2008. Yeah, I wanted to figure out how could I use the structural procedures of photography to talk about loss and to talk about extreme economic transformation rather than depicting it as one would expect. So that's how I came to this.
So you got these first 2 boxes of Kodak paper, but obviously, as we know, paper is becoming extinct. Photographic paper is becoming extinct. How do you continue to find the paper that you need for this series?
Yes, that's a great question. So there is an unexpected, inadvertent, planned obsolescence to the project itself, only because there's a scarcity of the Kodak paper that I'm using. So I can, if I'm lucky to find it on eBay, is how I find it, basically. And then the generosity of other people in art and photography have given me the paper. They found it in their archive or in their storage, whether it was cold or just room temperature storage. So it's been in terms of like eBay in one place as a marketplace, but also then just the altruism of friends or other colleagues.
Okay. Can you explain your process a bit more? Maybe
Absolutely.
I can pass the
Sure.
clicker to you and you can go through with the images.
Just to maybe explain then to viewers, I do make photographs, whether they're digital or kind of analog based, and then most recently I print then those images onto OHP transparency film. So it's an inkjet printer, produces the negative that you see right now. And then I have a very, I'm laughing here, but it's a very technically unsophisticated. It's incredibly not, it's not photographically correct in any way, nor is it heroic in terms of its production. I tried to use the darkroom, the traditional darkroom, as one would expect with this body of work, but it didn't work out because the silver content in the paper is so desensitized. The paper dates to 1993. So the height of a darkroom enlargeable was too high and not strong enough. So I discovered I had to use then desk lamps, is what you see here, stacked on top of books. It's very embarrassing that Charlotte Cotton's Photography's Magic is there, but she's a great supporter. And then I do what you do in the darkroom. I have to make a step test or test strip to figure out the right exposure, the right time for exposure. And what you're seeing here now is the desk lamp. And then if you can imagine the stack that you're seeing underneath the light source there starts with ANR, anti-Newton ring glass. That prevents kind of optical concentric circles from appearing on the print. And then in the second position is a negative, and the third position is the photographic paper. So it's basically a contact printing process. And then, as I was saying, I'd make test strips. This just shows you the step test for this one work called Marine Texting. Because the paper's silver content is so desensitized, each segment here that you're seeing is basically 10 minutes. And what I've discovered now, depending on the density of the negative, it takes anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes to make the print, again, because the silver content is so desensitized. And so now this is the kind of example of the final kind of print of marine texting. And this also appears in yours and Karen's exhibition.
Yeah. So, and you say you make photographs, you're making some of these photographs. How do you choose the subjects for your photographs? And then there are some kind of found images in some of your work as well. How do you choose your imagery, and how do the images reinforce your ideas, about that you're trying to convey, this, making this idea of precariousness of life and of institutions. How does your choice of imagery reinforce that, or does it?
It's actually, I think, very important, and I appreciate that question. In the beginning, when I started making this in 2008, I thought I was just going to do portraits on unfixed paper, and I realized that would not do too well for viewers. I realized that maybe viewers might get hung up on Phil Chang is interested in death and mortality, therefore the representation of a person and the fading of that representation would communicate too much about death, so I decided not to do that. So then I was going to go to a route in 2008 to do only photogram abstractions. Photograms are where you place an object on top of the photographic paper. I then realized that might be too much of a connection to modernism and modernism's insistence on opacity. Because all my prints turn to monochrome, there's something opaque there. So I decided I need to do an assortment of types of photographs, so portraits, landscapes, still lives, objects in my studio. I wouldn't call them abstractions, but there were definitely concrete photographic images exist, and I would say that the photograms represent that. And then most recently, I do these computer screenshots, and I'll show viewers this.
Oops,
I went too fast here. Well, you can see it on the left-hand side. It's just, these are prints that kind of document, or screenshots that document my computer activity, and that's been the most kind of recent method I've included into this body of work.
Okay, so the image on the left is a cover of Artforum.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So kind of with you bringing up this idea of morbidity or whatever, you also kind of picked up this series with a little more passion and maybe some new thoughts around the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk about
Absolutely.
that? Yeah.
So this project originates based on the financial crisis of 2008, and I've always made this work in response to some crisis. During the financial collapse, I wanted to borrow the language of finance and insurance industries, so that could be the word hedge, or the words reward and gain, or the words loss, or protection. I really wanted to borrow that language. And then when COVID began, I wanted to maybe respond to that crisis too, because I was in this position as an artist asking myself, is it frivolous to make art right now in a terrible crisis? And I thought, if I'm going to make an art project again, I just have to have some risk. The risk has to be very clear to viewers and myself. Yeah, so that was how I was thinking about the pandemic. Right now, the project has really evolved and made me really start thinking about something that I've learned from a colleague named Leandro Villaro, who is the program director at Penumbra Foundation. He helped me understand how process, object, and then residue are really important ways to think about this work. And the exhibition I did at Penumbra was titled that, Process, Object, and Residue. And so I hope that answers your question in terms of how I'm thinking about the project today. I never thought I would resurrect the project or revive it, but it was the pandemic that really kind of caused that for me.
And so in that exhibition at Penumbra, you were actually kind of showing how you made the work.
Yes.
And show it in the process of developing out or fading.
Correct.
And then you showed the results afterwards.
Correct. We showed it at the APAD photography show, APAD photography fair, basically. That was one site or test for that exhibition.
Why don't we go ahead and show the video?
Yes.
We made a video that's also in the exhibition that kind of shows that time-lapse process. And for us, we filmed it over 10 hours, 41 minutes, and 53 seconds. There was still a little bit of action going on even at that point. But it really depends on the amount of light.
It does, right?
And it was fairly dark in here. Yeah, so this is what you can experience.
And just for the viewers out in the world there, this is Carolyn's idea, was to have an analog clock and then do the time lapse. There's almost this fidelity to time that's being depicted, I think, in this video that's really great.
Right.
Yeah. And this video, I think, is almost a work of conceptual art, too. I don't know if you planned for that. But,
no, we just wanted to, we wanted to have a way that viewers could have that experience of going through, seeing it fade, because obviously I don't think anybody would want to stand there for 10 hours, 41 minutes, and 53 seconds, but it gave people that experience. And because there are these dark works hanging on the wall for much of the time. Through one thing I wanted to bring up about the show, another thing we did was we're replacing one image every week.
Correct.
On Tuesday mornings. So if you come on a Tuesday especially, you'll get to see one of the works in the process of its developing out or of its performance. So just keep that in mind. The show's got one more month, so come on a Tuesday or any day and see the show. So we've seen this process of the works fading. We've seen how you made them. We've seen them fading. We've seen kind of the end result, and we've talked about the fact that you have actually exhibited all three of those stages. What do you consider to be the work of art? Is it all three, or is it one part of that? What do you think about with those different kind of stages of the process?
I appreciate that question a lot. I have to then again remind or just credit Leandro Viaro from the Penumbra Foundation. He helped me understand there's a process involved, there's an object, there's the prints, and then there's a residue, and that would be maybe kind of remnants of the latent image that's somewhat legible or the exposed monochrome. So I would say, though, that's one way to conceive of where the artwork happens. It's not just static, no pun intended here, because it's our photographs, but nor are they just autonomous works on the wall. I think there's a lot of activity that happens outside of them, and then there's discourse, and then there's conversation, I think, that also is very helpful, I think, for that work. Most visitors will only see the monochrome that's exposed. They won't see the legible image that initiates everything. So some type of conversation or some type of hearsay has to happen, I think, whether that's written or spoken. And I do think that's an important part of the work, too. It's not usually the immediate part. But one thing, seeing the work at the Getty, I've never seen it translated in such a clear way. And by that I mean there's a small inkjet print that's static that shows what the work was. All the wall text is really helpful, and then there's a video that explains everything. I've never seen that degree of translation, or I guess we would call that an educational initiative.
What kind of responses do you get to your work? And I can talk a little. Well, I want to hear your answers and just what we've have heard here in the galleries too. But what kind of responses do you get to your work?
It's funny. I've really learned that in my wanting to make this work to respond to the financial crisis, and I don't want to be self-congratulatory here, but I think I succeeded. And by what I mean is, I wanted to figure out how can you make a photograph challenge certain market conventions or expectations of how you circulate an artwork, and I succeeded. And by that I mean I would never sell them, okay? And then secondly, I realized, depending on the professional kind of the relationship one has to the art world, whether maybe you're an art dealer or someone that works in commercial galleries or a patron or a collector, I found that type of relationship with the art world caused a certain sense of guilt when viewing my work, or a sense of responsibility on the viewer, feeling as if they're not valid or privileged to watch this print transform to a monochrome. But I discovered when I would meet with artists or speak to curators or speak to theorists or scholars or who am I missing in that? People have, definitely a commercial stake in that work, but also are somehow producers or cultural practitioners within the art world. They didn't think of it in terms of guilt. They had a very different affective response to it. I think they understood it as a kind of durational, performative work.
yeah, here in the galleries, people are a bit confused. I mean, it's in a gallery in paired with works by William Henry Fox Talbot, one of the inventors of photography, and Hiroshi Sugimoto, and whose works, oh, William Henry Fox Talbot and the other early photographers were obviously grappling with the same idea of fading, but they were trying to go the opposite
Exactly,
way.
I
They were
know.
trying to find a way to fix that image and save it and have it last all this time, and we're really struggling with that. But so I think it's an interesting juxtaposition.
It really is. Yes.
But and then the other aspect is, but some of the things that we've heard by visitors is just, some are like, wait, what is this? It's too dark to see.
Right.
Or people are fascinated by it. Or people say that's not art. Or I feel like, I don't know if I've heard people voice this, but I feel I've thought a lot about, I'm more immersed in the 19th century photography, and I'm always trying to imagine what it felt like to see a photograph for the very first time, and that wonder and that awe. And somehow with your work, even though you're going the reverse, you're capturing that again in one of the best ways I've seen.
Oh, well, thank you.
A contemporary artist do, and I think this fleetingness and this seeing that image disappear is as wondrous as seeing an image appear in a bath of chemicals or whatever. It's really
Well, thank
I
you.
think that's one of for me at least. Maybe I'm expressing myself, but I have a feeling that's one of the things that people are excited about
Oh, that's
with
great.
your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess we've kind of talked a bit about, how your work grapples with the circulation of photographs, the art market, the consumption of art, and the value of art. And we actually, the Getty, as I said, has your work in our collection now, and we acquired 11 prints of each of those 3 works, and I believe it's 5 of them will go through their entire developing out process over the run of the show, because as I said, we're changing one every week, and we'll have 6 more. That is a very challenging thing for an institution in many ways. Karen proposed this acquisition, and I got behind it, was so excited about it, as well as Jim Gans, and it was a real kind of challenge for us
can
in
imagine.
some ways to convey this wish to spend money on works of art that we know are going to disappear and that will have changed forever. But it was very worth the campaign, and I'm grateful to the conservators who helped us and the registrars who got their minds around it, and our director, Tim Potts, and everybody. But I have to say it was a real interesting exercise, and we brought you in one day
Correct.
to meet with a lot of us,
Right.
to kind of demonstrate one of the disappearing works,
Right.
and which also is like, oh my God, wait, it's gone, and I'd love to hear more about your experience of our acquisition of your work, and I know a few other museums have acquired it
Yes,
too.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think Carolyn's right. It was challenging, but it didn't mean that it was not possible. I think what I've discovered working with Getty, with you guys, is every type of acquisition is a case-by-case scenario. Each institution has certain needs, but also I think certain conventions of preservation. And so it's been interesting to learn your guys' process. But I've also realized, because the work itself is challenging, because the work itself is light sensitive and durational, that those challenges connect me with certain people and institutions, and they also alienate me greatly from a lot of institutions and a lot of people. And so I realized that's the terms of how I proceed with this work. I can see who wants to partner with me, because it's not it's not one-sided in any way. I think it really requires collaboration, partnership, a lot of discussion, as you remember, Carolyn, to figure out how this could be acquired, to continue the circulation of it within institutions, I think.
Well, I'm really glad that we were able to acquire them and show them, and yeah, it's very exciting.
Thank you.
Let's see. I have a question from somebody on Zoom, and I apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly. It's Kadue Wayne, who writes, as far as the fading of the photographs go, is it also a symbol of mortality, as well as it almost lives and dies over again? What?
I guess you could say that, yes. It wasn't my intention. I appreciate the question. It wasn't, my intention really was to figure out, if I want to deal with financial collapse in 2008, but by not photographing it, how could I deal with it photographically? And I just came up, I wish your listeners could see me, I'm just kind of like smiling and laughing right now. It was the silliest way to think about, again, the question, how would you use the structural conditions, the procedures of photography to discuss this kind of vast economic loss and tragedy that happened around the world, especially in our country. But the issue of mortality, I think, is there. It's unavoidable, especially when they're portraits. So when they're portraits, I've always tried to make sure the person is not commanding or communicating something very severe or serious or austere, but they're doing something kind of benign, like texting and wiping something out of your eye, as in this picture. Because I know then, I think a lot of viewers will attach something macabre or something kind of morbid to the kind of disappearance of a person's representation.
Okay, and somebody else, some anonymous person asked a question, but we've kind of answered that, was just about how our curators and art collectors are responding to collect photo-based work where the image disappears. We've kind of talked about that. It's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag, but I'm so fortunate to meet certain ones, like such as you, Karen, and Jim, and Arpad Kovacs, who really took the leap. It's challenging. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Somewhere I've read that you kind of feel liberated by your process. Can you talk about that and kind of as an extension, you are a teacher. You're teaching people about photography. How does your liberated approach to photography affect your teaching?
Yes, I think what you're referring to is I went on record saying that I'm very interested and committed to indexicality. So the idea that every photograph, especially analog, light-sensitive ones, have a connection to the world, right? They're traces of the world somehow. And I'm committed to it, but I'm also encumbered by that. I feel very responsible. If I'm going to make a photograph of the world, I feel very responsible with what that photograph refers to. And then in this unfixed body of work, I get less encumbered because I'm just momentarily kind of committed to the index, because all of my images, though they just are distinct and legible from one another, they will then turn to the same thing, and that's an exposed monochrome. It's ridiculous, but it's also freeing in a very odd way. I think I need to go into analysis to understand why, but it's very freeing. How that would help my students, I would hope, is to realize why indexicality is important. I think both theoretically, but also I think practically. That there's a reason why, on our driver's license or passport, we have a photograph of ourselves and not a watercolor of ourselves. Like, we need to make sure the image and the referent has a certain tight correspondence. And because I'm teaching photography in an art context, my students and I can deal with a more flexible relationship between referent and image, which I think other non-art applications of photography don't really have that liberty. Photojournalism, for instance, I hope there's a tight correspondence between referent and image, right? Or identification or surveillance, right? There's usually a tight correspondence between referent and image. I feel fortunate, and you could say that's liberating too, to teach photography in an art context. I have much more flexibility and different forms of opportunities to rethink that relation between referent and image.
Okay. We have a few other Getty staff members here in the room. I'm wondering if anybody has a question here, and I can repeat it so that everybody in Zoom can hear it if anybody has a question. And, yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about the acquisition? I'm curious about how are you storing pieces, and are you trying to keep them from being exposed in storage?
Yes, yes. So, and I'm sorry, what's your name? Margaret. Okay, Margaret's asked if we could talk a little more about the acquisition of the work and what steps we're taking to make sure the works, the unexposed works or the unfaded works don't fade unexpectedly. We've come up with a really good system of keeping them in very tight black envelopes, which Phil had kind of, we're continuing your process, and we're keeping them in these tight envelopes and very covered and taped and in a cylinder box with notes all over the box about what they are and not to open up those envelopes. Jim has a great suggestion which we are acting upon. Is we're going to keep one print that we can bring out into the study room and expose for a brief minute or so for different interested classes, so they'll get to have that experience. And obviously, it will eventually disappear, but we will allow a lot more people to get to see that in that way, and we'll be keeping notes on how long it's been exposed and things. And then lastly, we asked Phil to make inkjet prints about the same size as the ones that will be fading, so that we can also share those in the study room with classes. So those are the ways we're keeping track, and we're not discarding the works that have faded. We're also keeping those. They have accession numbers. They're part of our permanent collection. So that's how we're dealing with it. Okay, and I had two more questions. What is a future goal you have relating to your work? For example, is there work you would like, are there types of works you would like to produce in the future? So I guess, kind of maybe, how does this series relate to other work you've done or that you're going to be working on in the future or thinking about?
That's a great question. Thank you. I would like to make static photographs again. I think I can do that. I just have to figure out the subject matter. And then I have to just figure out, I have this hang up, but it's also a commitment to indexicality. And I find that commitment always causes certain, I think, there's theoretical and political issues depending on the subject matter for me. I think photography does such a great job at describing the world and images of the world. But I've found that something else, I think, describes the world, and that's how we produce photographs, how we circulate them, and how we consume them. I think that's more accurate of a depiction to the world for me. So to answer the viewer's question, I'm going to think about production and circulation and consumption as a way to guide my next project.
Okay.
Also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm running out of this paper.
Right.
There's a planned
Right.
obsolescence to the project, which is interesting because then it connects it back to kind of the political economy as well as supply chain issues and kind of market demands that photography is usually always subject to.
And one more question, which we've kind of talked about, but do you find yourself being pressured to use more traditional photography by artistic communities? And if so, what is your response to their opinions?
That's also a great question. I do not feel the pressure. It's funny to be in a 19th century photography show, to be honest. I wasn't thinking about the 19th century. I mean, I think about 1838.
It's a combo. It's a 21st and a 19th century.
That's true.
But yes, you are in the company of some very old works.
Sure, yes. So for maybe some viewers that have seen the exhibition, I'm adjacent to Fox Talbot's work.
Yeah.
That's an amazing relationship to be in. So I never thought of my work in that way, but this exhibition is really giving me that opportunity to understand, to think historically, right? To then historicize the materials that I'm using, the kind of odd way of going about this project, and then its role. And that's another way of asking, what does it mean for obsolete materials to have some type of purpose when they don't have a market purpose or their instrumentality has completely been eviscerated? I'm not sure if I'm answering the person's question. I'm wondering if they're meaning, do I think about alternative processes in photography?
Well, and with traditional photography, I think just, I think it.
Light
I think it's
sensitive
me
analog.
just, or just work that doesn't fade.
Oh yeah, that's static and fixed.
Yeah, static. So that's my interpretation.
Okay.
Gosh, is there anything we haven't talked about with respect to your this particular series or your practice in general that you'd like to bring up?
I think you've covered everything. It made me also realize there's a moment where I could just go on record to talk about why I think artistic risk is important, but also how community has been really important for this project. I was mentioning earlier that the challenges and difficulty that are built into the project, again, it connects me with certain people who are willing to take that risk, but alienates me from a lot of others.
Yeah.
And that's I found a very efficient way to go about things. I can spend my time wisely. And so that to me is a form of community or collaboration that I think is really important that I would want to maybe talk about and just put that on the record.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Oh, we've got one more question here in the audience, a live audience.
Once the images disappear, with today's technology, is there a way to reverse that or to make it reappear?
So the question is, once the images have disappeared, is there some way with modern contemporary technology to make them reappear?
I'm smiling because that's I don't know. It's almost like the zombie print or the zombie photograph. I mean, I guess if we've done video documentation, we could reverse the video, but the videos, that would be digital. But I think you're asking about analog material, somehow reversing that process. I tried to fix these prints in the darkroom. I subject them to developer to stop and fix. The silver in the emulsion, and my theory is that silver in the emulsion, the paper that I'm using, is so desensitized, it was not responding to the chemistry in the darkroom, which would allow it to fix. So I don't think there's a way, but I hope there's a lot of people logged into this Zoom call that might start, brainstorming or hive mind could happen.
Right.
If you know of a way, please let me know. Okay.
Well, just thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Phil.
Carolyn.
Thank you for today.
Thank you, guys.
You for all your just enthusiasm, curiosity, and your amazing artistic
Well, I appreciate it.
practice.
Thank
It's
you
been
for
a
this
real
opportunity.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everybody
Thank you,
here
everyone.
in the room, and thank you to our Zoomland audience. If we could click a little forward, just before we say goodbye, whoops, I'm going backwards. Just wanted to let you know there's another program coming up. Dun, dun, dun. On July 12th, Friday, there's going to be another art break, an armchair traveler guide to the medieval world, armchair traveler's guide to the medieval world. So please look for that, sign up, and thanks for joining us for your lunchtime or wherever you are, evening, and bye, Karen, and goodbye to everybody. Thank you so much.